Good afternoon, everyone. How is everybody today? Well, I hope you are enjoying the Kennesaw ESOL conference. So you're in one of the last breakout sessions for the day. I hope you enjoy this session, and today you'll learn a little bit about something that you can use for your newcomers or emergent bilinguals. My name is Golfar Andrews, and I'm going to put some phrases on the board. You know, in education, terminology and vocabulary and words change over time. So far, we're all familiar with the term ESOL, or English for Speakers of Other Languages. But now, during the presentation, you'll hear me refer to the term ESOL, also MLP, and that's Multilingual Learner Program. I explain a little bit more about that in the presentation. So today, the title of the presentation is Getting Off to a Good Start, Specialized Language Instruction for Emergent Bilinguals. And that's another new term that we've seen over the last few years, a change from terms such as limited English proficient to emergent bilinguals. And so that's one of the things that I will mention today. And so, first of all, I want to welcome everyone, and I want to ask one or two people, one of the things that you are looking for in the presentation today. You can also share what your role is, so I can have an idea of who is in the audience and what you might be looking for. So would anyone like to share one thing you hope to learn from today's session? Yes.
Some strategies to use with, I teach 5th grade core,
Okay.
and I have 2 students that have never been in school before.
Okay.
So some strategies that I can use that I can still meet them at their level, but get them ready for state testing.
Okay, so she stated that, and sometimes if you say something, I repeat it because this session, as with all the others, are hybrid. So we have participants at home or who are watching the presentation. She said she was looking for some strategies she could use for her 5th grade students to meet them at their level, but also help them get prepared for state testing. Anyone else? Well, first I'll give you a little bit about my experience, and then who are emergent bilinguals, and that's one of the new terms we are seeing now. Some ELD models, and then newcomer multilingual learner programs. So this session is mainly focused on newcomer programs. And has everyone heard of the term newcomer programs? So at the elementary level, At some schools and some districts, there are newcomer programs, and we'll learn more about those programs. And if you're in a situation where you're interested in that, you might advocate for it at your school or your district. And I'll give you a little bit about my background. Normally, I don't do these, a lot about myself, but because of the kind of presentation today, I'll give you a little bit about some of the things I've done in working with newcomers and how it's going to lead into the newcomer programs. So first, I was a regular elementary teacher in an elementary school, and at that school it didn't have that many multilingual learners or ESOL students. And so this was back some years ago, and these students were incorporated with other ESOL students. Then I had the opportunity to go to the United Arab Emirates and teach in bilingual schools. And so at that time, the Abu Dhabi Education Council, they decided to have all of their schools to implement a bilingual program in all of their schools. So with that experience, I learned a lot about teaching emergent bilinguals. These were students who were learning English. They had instruction in English and in Arabic. Then I returned to the United States, and I was a ESOL teacher working in a school that had a newcomer program, but it was a pull-out program. So in this program, the students were served in pull-out segments. And then finally, one of the next things was actually working in an intensive English program. And in that intensive English program, the students were in a self-contained class all day. But at this school, these students were mostly African refugees or SLIFE, which is students with limited or interrupted formal education. So in some of your schools, you may have students who are SLIFE. The numbers may vary. That's a relatively small percentage of the ESOL population, but it depends on your area. And now, as of now, I'm working in an elementary school where I teach multilingual learners. So now the term has changed from ESOL to multilingual learners. And I work in collaborative settings, but also in a language lab where we serve our emergent bilinguals. And they are learning BICS, which is basic interpersonal communication skills, and foundational literacy skills. And you see on the screen the word translanguage. Translanguage is a relatively new term, meaning that you are incorporating some of the students' native language into the instruction in the class, as well as scaffolded content. And that is one of the strategies that I'm going to explore today. And I think I might have missed that on the welcome. So the translanguaging, that's like a bonus. So you might have, has anyone here watched the DVD lately? No, you're all on streaming? Well, back in the day when they had the DVD, they had something called bonus material, bonus content. So translanguaging, that's going to be the bonus content. So in preparing the presentation for the day, the information I'm going to share, again, it's mainly about newcomer programs, but there's so much information available about reaching students with different strategies, particularly newcomers or emerging bilinguals. And so to try to squeeze as much information as I could, I decided to put that in, and I might even share something else too, depending on time permitting. So who are newcomers or emergent bilinguals? So these are newly arrived immigrants. Some experts state that a newcomer is a student between their first to third year. But for me, it's basically their first year in the country, and they're at the early stages of English language proficiency. And so when we talk about English learners or multilingual learners, we're looking at standard ELs, newcomers in that list, and long-term English learners. So a long-term English learner is someone or a student who's been in a ESOL program for 3 to 5 years or longer. So they've been in ESOL for a long time. So So an example of a long-term English learner is a student who started in kindergarten. They came to school, enrolled, they're in kindergarten, and now they're in the 5th, 6th grade, they're still in ESOL. They're a long-term English learner. And here are some examples of some newcomers. So not all newcomers are the same. You have some newcomers who have had literacy in their home country. So they've had schooling in their home country. They learned how to read and write in their native language. They may have learned academic content in their native language. So an example of that might be a student who's coming from Venezuela. So we know right now there are a lot of Venezuelan students coming to the U.S. They may have been in school, they come in Venezuela, they come to our school in the 3rd, 4th, when they're in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade, they've had 3 to 4 years of good education. In many cases, those students can develop English literacy faster because they can make that bridge using their home language from taking what they know in Spanish and using it as a bridge to learn English. Then there's some students who have had partial schooling or schooling not quite as good as students in other situations. They may not have grade level content in their home language, and HL stands for home language. And so their English language development or their literacy development would be on an average pace. Students with interrupted formal education, their education or their English language development might be slower at first, but they can eventually get there. So as a whole, it takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years for students to learn basic interpersonal communication skills or to acquire it. So we have students who come into our classes and it may take 1 to 3 years for them to learn or acquire basic conversational skills. So they come into the classroom and just by the sheer presence of them being exposed into our classes, they're hearing English all day from their peers, the teachers, everywhere else around them. It might take them 1 to 2 years to learn that oral language. But for academic language, and these are just acronyms, cognitive academic language proficiency, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So it takes them a lot longer to learn those reading and writing skills to get them up to grade level. And newcomers generally, when we talk about newcomers or emergent bilinguals, they are coming in at that lower level or the lowest level of language proficiency as based on the WIDA scale. So is everyone here familiar with the Access test? Access. So with Access, that is the annual English language proficiency test for ELs. So there's also the WIDA screener with both tests, the Access system. In the Access system, it goes from a 1 up to a 6. We never really see any students up to a 6. And here's the question why. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to see. I didn't bring any door prizes today. I'm sorry about that. No door prizes. Why do you think we may never see a student with a 6 in one of our schools? They exit out. Exactly. So in many cases, in Georgia, students can be reclassified with a 4.4 in most districts or higher. At a 5, they must exit. So usually when the students get up to this level, once they get to that point, they've exited. So at some point they may even get to a 6, but we'll only see that one time. Oh, come right on here. But we're talking about students basically at a level 1 as a newcomer. And so in my district, we refer to these students by their levels. So you might hear the term level, in our school district, level 1s and level 2s. And that's significant because right now what we're doing, and this is a strategy, and I'll put this on the board, modifying assessments, modifying working assessments. So that's one strategy. And this is an additional bonus. one strategy is modifying assignments and assessments. And you modify those assessments to meet the students at their academic and their linguistic level. Modify assignments and assessments. And one way you might modify an assessment is taking the regular assessment that you would give to the rest of the class and changing it so that you're adding scaffolds. You might change the text complexity of that assignment as well. And so when we talk about newcomer programs or services outside of the regular classroom, we want to look at first, one of the things you think about is how many students are we talking about? So here is just some examples, and this is coming from the Georgia Department of Education in terms of ESOL, in terms of a formalized way of serving students. Are there any ESOL teachers here? Oh, ML teachers? Okay, well, very good, thank you. So when you think about how you serve your students, we know that there's pull out, we know that there's push in, and we use those two models mainly depending on how many students we have in our school, how many classes we have, and how we can serve those students by scheduling. So these are the first ones. And then here, and I'll go back to this in just a second, the actual scheduled class for newcomers. That is an option that's available, and I will share more about that a little bit later. There's the innovative delivery model, and that's the cluster model. I will share that in just a second. And then, of course, there's dual language immersion. So the researchers say dual language immersion is one of the best ways to serve emerging bilinguals. Dual language immersion, that is another, or DLI. Has anyone here heard of DLI? Does anyone have DLI schools in their district? All right, very good. So what district are you in? APS, that's right. APS has some dual language schools. Smith is one. Smith, Brandon, a few others, and APS, dual language immersion. And with the dual language immersion models, there's usually 50-50, but I've heard of 90-10. So it depends. Some districts, dual language immersion, they have a 90-10, but in Georgia, most of them are 50-50. And with 50-50, the students learn 50% of the content in English and 50% in another language. I am from Gwinnett County, and in Gwinnett we actually have 3 different kinds of dual language immersion: English, Spanish, Korean, English, so excuse me, that's English, Spanish, English, Korean, English, and then French, English. And then some are 90-10, and those might be in places like Texas and other places. They have a 90-10, where the students start off 90% in the home language, 10% in English, and then they go to 50-50. But when we talk about what kind of services that you can provide in terms of monolingual English delivery models, the DLI, that's not monolingual, that's home language and English. We start at the average amount of instructional time. So depending on your goals and your objectives, if you're really lucky and you have a significant number of newcomers, you might be able to establish an intensive English class. So the question I want to ask now is, so who here works in a school that has what's referred as a high density ML EL school? Just one? So we're talking about a school that's 50%. 50%. So 50% of your population or more is made up of ELs. Even if you have 30%, that would be enough possibly to have some sort of intensive English program. It may not be all day, but it might be up to 2 segments. Because we know in a regular ESOL program, you can have, so from kindergarten to 3rd, they can get 1 segment a day. 4th and 5th, they can get 2 segments a day. And that's in a regular ESOL. That's with regular ESOL. If we're talking about coming up or multilingual learner program, then the next one is the designated ESOL or pullout. So you may not be able, or your school may not be able to, or decide not to establish something such as a half-day program, but you may have pullout. So if you have pullout, then you may be able to put together 2 segments a day for those students. And then if you cannot get there, then you can incorporate some special lessons or support in your push-in or pull-out segments. Yes, question?
Do you get paid for the 2 pullouts, or you?
Yes, you do. You do get FTEs, and these are actually FTE numbers. So on the screen, so the question is, do you get paid for it? Do you get FTE? Yes, you do get FTE for this. And you can get FTE, or it can be allowed for other segments if you're creative. And the way they did the intensive English when I was in DeKalb, when the students were in intensive English all day, the ESOL teacher served as a teacher of record. So in that situation, when those students were in my class all day, there were ESOL segments, but there were other segments where I was serving as their teacher. So whether it was a math segment, a social studies segment, I was technically the teacher. So I was the classroom teacher. And you do know now at this point, because of the cluster model, you have classroom teachers who are serving as the ESOL teacher of record. Who knew that? So there's something called a cluster model, and the cluster model, you'll have an ESOL endorsed classroom teacher. An ESOL teacher won't come to the class, but he or she is actually the ESOL teacher. So that's the ESOL teacher, and the students in the classroom all day. You may have 15, 16 ESOL students in the class, a class of 22, 23 students. But if that teacher is ESOL endorsed, he or she is the ESOL teacher. By the way, if you have any questions at any time, you just stop me. You just ask the question, then I'll repeat it.
Are we saying that's best for generating funds, or?
Well, that is one of the things.
Sounds like this.
That the question was, is it best for generating funds? And that is something that some schools are doing or some districts are doing. They're using that ESOL endorsed classroom teacher to serve as the ESOL teacher. Because of that, and
Do they serve only ESOL students?
no, and I think the next slide, the next slide actually is what we were just talking about. So here, we're talking about it, if you look on your screen, this is from the state of Georgia, and I just pulled this up actually this morning. This is one of the delivery models for newcomers. So this is an actual, it says scheduled class with newcomers and grades 4 through 12. And so that is one model. But someone asked about the cluster model. And with the cluster model, you have a content and ESOL certified teacher delivering instruction to both ELs, which is English learners, and non-ELs in the classroom. And the reason that has to happen is because every student, every EL must receive at least one segment from an ESOL endorsed teacher. So that's one of the reasons why we have that, why they do that. That is one of the state regulations. So if you have ELs in your classroom, either you or another person who's ESOL endorsed must serve those students at least one segment a day. You can have one for K to 3 or up to 2 for 4th and 5th. Okay.
So if it's a gen ed teacher and they're ESOL certified, what I understood, but cluster is might not be the same.
Okay, go ahead.
Which might not be correct. But I was under the understanding that if that's your content area, like if you're an ELA teacher, I was told that you would also have to have a para in the classroom for 45 to 50 minutes for our grades, 3 through 5. You would have to have a para. But if you were a math teacher and you were also ESOL certified, you would still have to have another ESOL certified teacher within that area because ELA is not your specialty. So is that correct or incorrect?
That's correct. So the question was, if you were, let's say you're a middle school teacher. Is everybody here elementary? No. Okay. So if you were certified only in math, would you have to have a parapro if you're teaching, was the question ELA or another subject?
If you're math, I was told that you had to have another certified ESOL certified teacher with you teaching for at least that 45
for another subject?
minute block.
So if you're a math certified teacher and you're ESOL certified, you can serve those students, and the school can get credit for that. So
You don't have to have another certified
no,
teacher in it?
no. So in most cases, the teacher certification in the elementary schools is early childhood or elementary. So they're qualified to teach any subject. So for example, I have an elementary certification. I can teach ELA, math, science, social studies, all of the subjects for elementary. So I've got the entire class covered. That's the elementary certification covers all of the students in the class. But for ESOL, you must have an ESOL endorsement. If you have both, then you're covered to serve that student for that segment.
But once you get to high school, that's when
It gets different because in high school, there is no blanket certification. So the question was, when you get to high school, is it different? It's different in high school because you may be certified only in
I'm certified in Spanish and ESOL.
Is that-
ELA, you call it to certify for them to get that this morning.
That's right. That's right. Food for thought, huh? So now moving on, we're going to keep moving. So now we're looking at the regular ESOL program. We're going to keep on moving. You can provide special support or extra support in situations where there are not scheduled newcomer classes. And you might most likely find a situation like that in schools with lower ESOL populations. So if you have a school where you have 600 students and you only have maybe 8 newcomers, it may be a little bit more difficult to serve those students in a special pullout, particularly with multiple grade levels. So you may have to serve those students, or you may choose to serve those students in your regular push-in or pull-out segments. Then if you have enough students, you may be able to have a pull-out segment with just those students. That's the situation I'm in right now. This year, we have enough students on each grade level, because we're a high-density school, that we can use one of our regular FTE segments for pull-out for those students. And that's composed all of newcomers, all of emergent bilinguals, but we're able to do that because of the number of students we have. Also, it depends on the number of teachers you have who can serve those students, because technically we could have pull-out classes for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but we don't right now have enough teachers for all of those classes. And then finally, there's the intensive English class, which is multiple segments, and that is a transitional model generally, because the students don't stay in those classes for a significant amount of time, maybe 9 weeks up to a year. And those programs, they focus on basic development, basic social and instructional vocabulary, targeted lessons to develop the basic interpersonal communication skills, foundational literacy development. We're teaching the students the alphabet, letter sounds, segmentation, sight words, reading simple sentences, some comprehension. Some programs, you can have some lessons for U.S. culture. For example, teaching about the holidays, different aspects of the culture, and then some sheltered instruction. And the sheltered instruction is modified academic content, whether it's math, science, or social studies. And it's a transitional program. Any questions so far? So I'm moving a little bit fast because we want to get to the end. I want to have time for questions. And usually this is monolingual unless you are fluent in that student's native language. So for me, I do speak Spanish, not completely fluent like a native, but enough where in some cases I can make use of translanguaging to help bridge that gap. Does anyone here ever speak a language other than English? Do you? Okay. Spanish? Spanish, we have some Spanish speakers. Okay, very good, thank you. So you can use some of that. And even if you don't speak another language, you still can make use of translanguaging. You don't have to speak the language of the student to incorporate some anchor charts, if you like, and other things. And these are some examples, and we've seen things like this. This is what we're familiar with in terms of ESL. English as a second language. We've got some basic instruction vocabulary we use. This is a bridge sometimes to help get the students talking. For example, you might ask students about things that you like, and you might provide sentence stems, which is another structure, which I did not include at the end of the PowerPoint. But sentence stems is another big one. Sentence stems and sentence frames. So the sentence stem is just the first part of it. I like blank because, or I like to blank. And the sentence frame is a little bit longer, but it has words on both ends at the beginning and the end, and the students just fill in words in the middle. And so you could use the sentence stems or sentence frames to get the students talking about things they like, what they like to do. Then that basic interpersonal communication skills, teaching the students about making introductions, expressing basic needs. That's important. We also talk about things they like, don't like, following directions. That's important. You can teach that. You can teach it in the classroom. Whether it's a newcomer, you can teach it in the regular classroom. These are things that you can incorporate as part of your instruction and interactions with the students, because that's important. For example, may I go to the restroom? Can I go to the bathroom? Or follow instructions, even as simple as line up. They have to learn, they have to know that. Line up. Sit down, put your papers, or please put your papers in the white basket. Of course, basic literacy development is quite a bit involved. These students, they have to learn that, they have to acquire that, and they may not get it in 4th or 5th grade, because we have in some schools newcomers coming in all the time, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. The 4th grade teacher, he or she is not really teaching these things here. That's not part of their curriculum. Oh, okay. And in some districts, in the ESOL curriculum, there's even a place for U.S. culture. And then sheltered content. So the sheltered content is very similar to grade level content, but it's presented at a level that is at the student's linguistic level or their language level. So the students are still learning about, for example, place value or the 13 colonies. And it just so happens that my 3rd graders are learning about the 13 colonies in social studies. The big difference is the text that they see is not the same text as in the regular classroom. It's not the same thick, dense text. But we still want them to learn about the 13 colonies. We want them to learn that there's 3 regions, what were the colonies in each region, and why the colonies were established, and so on. But it's scaffolded to their level. So which one, or how would you serve the students? So I'll give you a minute to look at that on the screen. There's some different considerations. So thinking about your school and your ML or EL population, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, which one of these models do you think you might want to try in your school? Anyone like to share? Right here in the back, thank you.
Not necessarily one over the other, but this is my first year being a ESOL
Yes.
teacher, and today I've learned I have more newcomers than I thought. 1 to 3 years. But I know next year that I want to do a phonics block. So like my kids in K2, they get phonics in the classroom, and we're rocking and rolling in my classroom. But my 3-5 kids that are just coming to the country, I need a block for them
Yeah.
because they miss the phonics in lower grades. So that could be their double segment that they get if I can fit that in.
All right, thank you for sharing. So she stated that she would like to try a phonics block in her school for her, particularly her 4th and 5th graders, so they can get a double segment, using that double segment for phonics. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a newcomer pull-out class now. I pull most of my grade levels, but I have a newcomer class, and it serves them not only in their language development, but their social, emotional, like the time that they get to spend together as newcomers
Yes.
has been really cool for them, and a really great place for them to acquire comfort and friendship. So I hope to keep the newcomer pull-out if I can make it work with my schedule, because I've seen it be really beneficial for them.
Wow, excellent. So she stated that she liked the newcomer segment because it allows the students not only to learn the content, the language, but interact with their peers and learn the cultural aspects of it. Anyone else? One of the factors, it depends on how many students you have in your school and the scheduling that you can provide, the number of teachers, how you can schedule that. So for example, support through the regular ESOL is the less intensive, particularly if you have a smaller number of teachers and a small number of students. But the more students you have and the more teachers you have, the more options you have available. For example, you might even be able to do half day. All right. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry. And so that leads into the question of which one. So again, the more newcomers, the more delivery programs and options that you have. And also, we also look at the number of segments. If your school only has 7, then you may have 7 newcomers, students. You may have to be a little bit more creative as to how you serve those students. The more students, the more segments you are able to provide and get FTE for. And what's the objective? The objective is to provide students access to language and literacy instruction that they're not going to get in a regular classroom. That's the key with these programs, is to provide these students with the instruction that they will most likely wouldn't get in the regular classroom. Provide them with their listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills for success. We know that they're not going to be at grade level at the end of the instruction because it's, in many cases, short term. But to give them that foundation that's going to provide support for further instruction and intervention. So we want to be able to put the students, have the students come through, whether we provide that instruction in a regular classroom, at a kidney table, without specialized lessons, or our 1 or 2 segment pull out, or our all day or half day intensive English. But after they leave us, be able to go on and have another teacher or even ourselves support them when they get to the next level. So if they come in at a level 1, at the end, if they're a level 2, then we can help them get to level 3 and 4. Okay, what are the keys to success? And I think this is particularly important, particularly if you have an intensive English program, is to have a goal or a plan for your instruction or assessment. Having a clear criteria for the program entry and exit. For example, who qualifies and then who exits. So what's the criteria for exit? You have students who come in, let's say I have a newcomer program, they're with me half a day. How long do they stay with me half a day? 1 year, 2 years? having those goals and objectives so that they can go in and move to the next level and move on. And here are two examples of a curriculum map, and I'll let you take a look at it. So this particular one is one I actually did a few years ago, and it had instructional and social themes, literacy development, integrated listening, speaking, and then vocabulary units. So at that time I was teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade and newcomers. So there was a 3rd grade class, a 4th grade class, and a 5th grade class. So in addition to the what you consider the regular ESOL instruction, there was also sheltered content as well. And that's what an average week might look like. So I had to keep it all together, organized, so that everything fit in to the time I had with the students, but we were still progressing, because even in the pull-out class, my goal was to get those students to the next level, to get them from a 1 to a 2, 2.5, so that they could be on their way to moving out. So eventually that's our goal. ESOL or multilingual learner program, the actual goal is to get those students to proficiency so they can exit the program. We don't want any long-term ELs. We want as few long-term ELs as possible. So we want to get those students learning English at a relatively fast rate so they don't stagnate and they're not in ESOL in high school. And these were some of the program goals that the intensive English program I worked at. And so the students came in, we tested them with the reader screener, and they stayed in the program until they scored a 2.0. So at some point, if we thought they were ready to exit and go to the regular classroom, we gave them another test, and if they got a 2.0, then they exited.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
You gave us the screener again?
Yeah, at that time they would.
For the
Yeah,
access test.
The access test or screener. At that time they were doing screeners again. Yeah, I know. Yes, I know. Okay.
You can only do that a year, right? Because you can only screen one time a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. That's what-
So now, yes. So here is the ESOL curriculum for a district, and that's actually the one that's an excerpt of one from Gwinnett County. So I served on the committee that wrote the ESOL AKS, Academic Knowledge and Skills. But then there was also, that's an example of the 3rd grade intensive English curriculum. So we have 2 different curriculum. So the point is to have a plan, to have a place that you're working from. So what are some of the elements of a good newcomer program? Based on what we talked about today, what would you expect to see if you're observing a newcomer or emerging bilingual class? Who would like to share? Who would like to share out? Visuals. What else? You can see translanguaging. Anything else? Interactions. So we're going to keep going on. We have a few more minutes left. These are some materials just outside. I was talking to the gentleman outside, and he was sharing some information with me about some of the program materials you might use. I've used In the USA, but the gentleman outside said that program is going out. They have a new one that's coming out. One I liked, and I used that in my intensive English program, On Our Way to English, which was good. But there are many different programs that you can use. There's computer programs we've all seen, Imagine Learning. That's one of the ones one of my favorites. And then finally, translanguaging. Yes. And so translanguaging is when bilinguals use two or more languages to communicate. And it's more than just students talking in the home language. The home language is incorporated in instruction. It's not just cognates. And so these are some of the things you'll see with translanguaging. There's environmental print, shared reading, or guided reading. That's in 2 languages. So when the writing is translanguage along with assessment and content instruction. One of the strategies I'm going to share with you is a strategy called preview, view, and review. So with preview, view, and review, you present the content in the home language, and you might use a YouTube video. So you could show the students a short YouTube video, then you would teach the language in English, which is your view, and then at the end you could review the language in their home language. So that's one of the things I like to do. I don't always try to teach. I'm not completely comfortable trying to explain something in Spanish, so I just go use a YouTube video. 2 or 3 minutes, let the students watch it. They can watch it on a computer, at a table. Then they can, it activates their background knowledge, and then I can teach that content in English. And one tip for searching for videos on YouTube, put the term in Spanish or whatever that language is. So if it's equivalent fractions, I believe the term is fracciones equivalentes. You put that in the search bar for YouTube, and it will show you those videos in Spanish. And you just pick a video, you show it to the students so that they can watch it. You can put that on a Google Classroom or have it ready for them, and they can watch it themselves at that computer. And that's one strategy you might be interested in using. Here are some resources or links. Here's some additional books. One of the ones I like is Rooted in Strength. That has a lot of practical information on translanguaging. Well, let me go back. Also, this book here, Success with Multicultural Newcomers and English Learners, has a lot of good tips and resources in it. Pathways to Greatness is a good book, but that's a little bit more for middle and high school, higher level. But I like these 2 here for the elementary. And then these are references. Any questions? My contact information is on the screen. Yes, question.
I was just going to ask, could you go back to slide 39?
Slide 39, let's see here. Yes. Any questions? Yes.
I started off the year with like 35, 30, I'm at 78.
Students all together?
Yeah, just starting.
Yes. Well, those people, thank you for coming out.
So you start back over like week 1?
So,
Because we're on week 1.
well,
You know, with like week 1.
so,
And then week 1 was like school, bus, teacher, principal, that kind of like, which I don't know. I was just wondering what you did.
well, for those, you're welcome. For those students, how I will work with them, if I have a new student who's coming in the middle of the year, I might pull that student and work with that student in a small group. I might, because I have a crate that recycles that has some smaller lessons to teach that basic vocabulary. Because I wouldn't teach it to the whole class again, but you just pull that student or those 2 or 3 students who come in and give them 10, 15-minute lessons. Because you have new students coming in all the time, and it's sometimes difficult to start over.
Time for that.
Yes.
You suggest getting, if they're all split in that one class and you only have, like, for me, I have a block.
Mhm.
So I have them for 90 minutes, but like, if I can't pull them, because I have another group come in, how do you suggest serving those kids that came in the middle of the year? They're newcomers.
Sometimes, and this is what I've tried this year, is the videos. the YouTube videos, you can do it in, you can pull some short videos and put it on Google Classroom and do it like that. Or have it queued up so that when the students come in, they know to go watch those videos.
Do you have any suggestions, like, in our county, like, I love going to YouTube and finding something I can, but I can't assign it to my kids on their laptops because teachers laws. So it has to come from a teacher.
There's something,
But I've been trying to get around it, trying to use other things, and I'm like, you want this.
I believe there's a teacher tube.
Yeah, teacher too.
Yeah.
There's a kids too.
Kid too.
Kids too, it doesn't have a lot of stuff.
Go. Yes. But how they did it, they coded it.
That makes sense.
So then, like, two Esau's had it.
Right.
But then the
The
other
rest of
one,
it's the content that they need to get to you guys. Oh, I totally understand.